So we're going to go ahead and kick off. How many people are coming to this meetup group for the first time? Okay, well, we got a lot of new people. How many people are familiar with Lean Startup? You've read Running Lean or you've read Eric Ries's book? Okay, good. So we have a pretty knowledgeable crowd tonight. So as always, we've been meeting at Capital Factory now for about, I think maybe even 4 years. So I always like to say a big thank you to them. We used to meet when they were on the 8th floor, and it was a room that was like the size of this. And as they've grown, so has our community grown, and in general, just even the whole Austin startup scene. So I always appreciate that they give us this great event space to hold these meetups at. So for tonight, with the presentation that Josh and Tyler are going to do, there's a really good saying that I heard recently, which is make what you can sell rather than sell what you can make. And I think that's a really good quote because it's really indicative of making sure that you focus on your business model and not really just your actual solution. And as entrepreneurs, as people who are developers and designers, we love to build things, right? And there's probably people in this room who have worked for months on releasing something, and then all of a sudden, no one cares about it, right? You've put your beautiful baby out there into the world, and you're ready for people to start clamoring in, and literally, no one gives expletive anything about it, right? So with having Tyler and Josh share their story, it's really good because not only are they they've gotten to the point where they've validated that they have something that's worth building, but they're really going to share how they go about being cognizant of, well, when do I know what's the right thing to build, right? Like, how do I go beyond just what I enjoy building, but trying to put a process to it, which is not a very easy thing, as we just talked about right now. So please welcome Josh and Tyler for tonight's presentation. How's the audio? You guys can't hear this. Well.
All right. Howdy. I'm Tyler.
It's Josh.
That's Josh. And we co-founded a startup called AskU. We make question and answer apps for different college campuses. So if you've ever used Quora, we make like a Quora-like app for different college campuses. And so we're at 16 campuses right now. There's our beautiful team. And yeah, so the summary of this talk is that sucking at something is the first step to becoming sort of good at something. And so we're going to talk about that. Awesome.
Cool. So just to give you a kind of idea, like why this has kind of been accepted in the startup community. There's a lot of companies have done things with the least amount of effort possible, and I just want to kind of highlight a couple examples. So Airbnb, if you haven't heard their story, back in the day, they actually instead of setting up a website and getting people to sign on and start selling their rooms online, they actually just called people who are already trying to rent their rooms on Craigslist and tried to get them into an email list. And so they got these people to agree to, put their listing in an email list, and they blasted out to their friends. And so through that, they were able to validate that people were willing to, rent rooms from strangers, and it worked out. And then Food on the Table. If you don't know what they are, they build an app where you can find things that are on sale in your grocery store and then create recipes from those so you can save money on food. And Emiliano was actually telling us that they basically just went to Whole Foods every day for a month, went through the store manually and took note of what was on sale, and then emailed out recipes with those ingredients to their users to kind of validate, that this was something that users wanted and understand more what was good and what was bad about what they were doing before they ever wrote a single line of code. And so, yeah, both of these examples are just good ways to understand like why interfacing with users is a lot more important than just writing things.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think most people kind of get the idea of a lean startup, start lean. So the question that we want to answer tonight is, okay, how do you know when to build what, and how do you kind of fake it until you build that? And so in our case, we actually started our startup as students at Texas A&M, and so we had any whoops? There we go. All right, beautiful. so we had very, very limited time. We were taking classes and extracurriculars and whatnot. And so I think that was actually really good at the time, and I'll go more into detail about this later. But it really forced us kind of into this. And so one thing that we had to do is really just focus on not building something, but the effect that we wanted to create what it was that we were making. And so, for me, it was this problem of, okay, well, I'm a student, got all these friends that don't know anything about how to apply for this scholarship or where to live next year, because they're all freshmen like me. How do I, reach out to people and ask them questions? And there's this kind of hole, there's this vacuum of, the university isn't really doing that support very well. And so we wanted to create that support network for students. And rather than, go into, I want to make this really cool Ruby on Rails app, which we later did, we ended up, bootstrapping it in another way, which we'll talk about. So basically what we did is we found this open source Q&A app that did a very kind of dumbed down version of what we wanted to do. And we put our design on top of it, which you'll see in a second. It's really great. And we made sure Facebook login worked, and we launched it. And so we kind of launched from this validated assumption that we already knew that students trusted other students to get information about.
The MVP microphone. No, we're going to switch over to that already.
There we go. All right. Where was I? Yeah, so we knew students that trusted one another to get information. So what we wanted to test is, okay, let's take it online and see if they'll trust students that they don't necessarily know in an online setting. And so that's what we did.
Yeah, so this is the lovely design that I was very proud of here in this presentation. This is the only picture I could find of it. So yeah, as you can see, it's nothing like super techy or awesome looking. It's kind of become a company meme in our company. We make fun of the font. It's Comic Sans. It totally is. So it's almost Comic Sans. So yeah, obviously there was nothing spectacular about what we launched at our school to begin with, and yet we were able to learn a lot. I'm not going to acknowledge that question. And one of the big things we learned when we were, first starting this was, this is something that was brand new. It never existed before, so we had no idea how we were going to market it. Also, we were computer science students, so obviously had no idea how we were going to do this. And at first, we tried to just completely create this overnight success. We did all kinds of things on campus. We had signs. We got newspaper articles. We emailed our friends. Just kind of went bootstrap completely and just tried everything. And what we eventually found is one thing that was working, and that was what was great about just trying a little, a lot of little things. We were able to find that one thing that was working. That was Twitter. We found that our campus was really connected on Twitter, and we were able to start iterating on that social media. So basically, we started an account just kind of as a side thing. Actually, one of our co-founders just kind of did it on his own and started tweeting things out. And we eventually found, iterated on those tweets and found something that worked consistently. And the great thing with this all is we didn't spend very much money on marketing or, going all in on one thing and then finding it failed. We were able to try a lot of little things and then find the one thing that was working really well and then invest it on it. So so for the MVP, we validated three main things. Students did need help finding this information like we thought they did. We know we needed it. Other students did too. The thing that Tyler talked about earlier was, students trust each other in person, but do they trust strange students online? We were able to validate that too. And then we were able to find a marketing channel that we didn't even have an idea of before that was going to work really well, and that was Twitter. And we were able to do this all off that open source MVP that we built over the course of, I don't know, grabbed it together over the course of like 2 weeks, rather than building out, the full Rails app that eventually took us probably 6 months to write, which was fantastic. So yeah, so then we had to kind of iterate on our marketing as well. We started by just writing tweets by hand and just manually testing these over and over. And eventually, as we started to add more schools, we started to introduce more tools. But we didn't really do any of these things until we absolutely had to. So we were at one school first. We were doing it all by hand. I think we did that while we were through the first like 3 schools we were at. And then we introduced a tool to help us. And introducing this tool required no coding on our part, and once again, we went externally and bought something to save us time. And then from there, we built in more tools into our custom software to help us, not have to write these tweets by hand to make us faster. And we didn't do this until we had to. And then finally, we wanted to be able to track our progress, and so eventually, Tyler put his head down and started building these things. So.
Yeah. So any questions so far? So basically, we ended up for about a year, and then over time we've kind of built those things up. We definitely made a few mistakes. One of them was we wanted to test on-campus marketing. So as soon as we got a little bit of funding, we said, okay, let's do this. We've always wanted to. We just thought flyers were the future for some reason, and so we hired a full-time employee to actually help us, recruit a bunch of on-campus, what do we call them? Campus leaders, basically marketing interns of sort, and manage them and basically manage that program. And it ended up not working out. Mainly because flyers are not the future, but we had already found the future, and it was social media. So that was kind of one of the mistakes that we made. But I think this pretty much sums up the lessons that we've learned, one bite at a time. So to kind of sum that up. Actually, to add to it, our product was. Always built at first for just one school, because that's where we were. We were at Texas A&M, and we actually you can talk a little bit more about this, but even when we wanted to launch more schools, what we ended up doing is we didn't update the product. Does this sound terrible? Okay. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Maybe I'll just speak up. Okay. Feels better anyway. So we didn't end up changing our code to support more than one school. We just ended up literally launching an entire full stack of infrastructure for the second school and for the third school. And that was pretty time consuming, but it was a lot less time consuming than how long did it take to update our app?
Almost a month.
A month of coding to actually get it and recode it to support more than one website.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So, why were you guys so apprehensive towards building up the same? Why were we so conscious at the time? Most people don't lean toward that as soon as they get some level of traction. It's this growth is going to explode, and I need to build architecture around it.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think for us, it was kind of a matter of, okay, well, yes, we got it at one university. The question is, can we actually replicate that at other universities, or was it kind of just our culture, the fact that we were there? And so for us, I think we just kind of had this cautious mindset. And I don't know, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much just to say. Just because these problems exist at our school, we didn't know they existed anywhere else, and it was, like you said, way less time to just set up another thing again rather than recode the whole thing.
Yeah. Are there any other questions so far, by the way? The question is, how do we make money? And the answer is, in short, we don't have recurring revenue, but we have done a lot of validation on targeted advertising sort of revenue model, and I can go into more detail about that after the talk if you like. Good.
You guys did sort of information around the questions and answers and what things were down.
Okay, that's actually another great example of something that we didn't build because we didn't have any way of banning users, or we could moderate the content by going into like a SQL command line for a while, but we didn't have any other way of doing it. And it ended up not being a big problem for us. As we grew, we ended up needing a little bit better control over that, but it's actually pretty rare that we run into something like that. So we built that out later. Good.
It's a two-part to your question. So
Okay.
you said you tested a lot of different types of questions to engagement. Was there any sort of common theme to the type of questions? That's my first question. And then you said, once we figured out Twitter worked, then we invested in it. So what did investing look like? Is it a certain amount of money or like a large amount or?
Okay, I'll answer. So the first question was, what kinds of questions work better?
Yeah, was there a theme of what worked better?
Well, yeah, and it changes throughout the year. So, last month it was, everyone that's going to this university has questions about dorms. So that was a big theme. Now it's questions about orientation kind of going into the summer, and it kind of cycles throughout the year. But to answer your question about investing in Twitter, I think it was mainly our time. And that's something I'm going to talk more about is, most valuable resources, your time. And later it was, over the past few months, it's been, okay, we're spending a little bit of cash to actually hire interns to do kind of the stuff that we were doing, as well as staff time to build the tools out that really help us be more productive.
Hi, so as a fellow developer, one thing I've always wondered is at what point can you sort of, templates you bought or stuff you forked on GitHub, like at what point is that not able to support, an app that you want to build? And at what point do you say, okay, I need to build an API in Rails or Node or something like that? What's the breaking point? I guess just to say.
Well, and I'll just talk about our story, because I don't think there's like a concrete answer there. But basically, we found that the open source project we were using it was written by a guy who didn't speak English. So that was one big no-no. And for us, we were on that open source project for, actually I think the next slide says, I think it was about 6 months. So we started building, once we had validated to ourselves that this was going to work, we started building our custom software behind the scenes. And then switched over without anyone figuring that out.
Yeah, I mean, the code was really, really bad. I mean, we, just to get like one feature like Facebook login working took a lot. And we ended up not being able to do any product development on top of that. So that's why we started writing our own. But it got us validated, like it allowed us to validate the problem and the solution really that we wanted to provide. So.
And we still obviously use tons of open source projects and things like that. But in terms of the core, that's not all it was.
So I'm going to keep going, but feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. And okay,
yeah, I'm kind of expanding what Tyler said. So yeah, we were using the open source project for 6 months while we kind of started to build an in-house project. And then we were actually on that in-house project that we said only ran one school at a time, but we had like separate server systems for them. We were on that for I think actually over a year. So we've just actually invested the time to be able to support more than one school just like 3 months ago. So it just shows like how much you can actually do if you just kind of put your head down and say, okay, it's going to be all right, it's not perfect, but I can learn what I need to learn with what we have so far.
Yes, the most valuable resource is always time. This is a lesson that I've learned kind of, over the entire time I've been working. Looking back, everyone wants to raise money for their business, and money is important. It's good, but I found that money always buys you time, not the other way around. And so, if you're investing your time in order to save a few bucks, obviously, if you're saving tens of thousands of dollars for a day of your time, that might be different depending on what size you are. But in almost every case that I've seen, invest money to save yourself time, and invest your time in the things that really matter that no one else can do. This is something that I'm actually blogging about right now. Are there any student entrepreneurs in the room? Yeah, one. Okay. Well, then I won't go too into depth about it. But I think one thing that we found was that it's really important that we we're strategic about allocating our time while we're students, rather than going out and trying to basically run a business as a student, which can work in some cases, but in other cases, in most cases, it's not the best use of your time.
Yeah, so this is an exercise out of the Lean Startup. And we found it to be really helpful into deciding, okay, what are we going to do next? And why should we do that? And it's a pretty simple exercise. You simply ask, okay, we want to build feature X. Okay, why do we want to build feature X? Why would users want this? And you basically go down 5 whys of whatever you're talking about to really understand what is the core reason for doing this. And what we found that if the core reason isn't one of these 3 things, then we absolutely should not do it. If it's not what the users want, and we have data or qualitative data or quantitative data to prove that, if it's not helping us to find out what users want, so that could be building analytics tools or investing time in doing user interviews or something like that, or it doesn't save costs or generate revenue. If it's not one of those 3 things, it's probably not worth your time doing. To be honest, there's things we've done that are fun things to do that we want to do, and you have to give yourself a little bit of that. But these 3 things are really the core of where your focus and time should be placed.
Cool. So I'm going to get a little bit more practical here and just talk about planning an experiment, and just kind of what's worked for us. Obviously, other people might have a different process, but this works really well for us. So pretty much any change that we make, substantive change in the user experience or in how we market something, we plan like this. So we'll write out a Google Doc. We'll make a new Google Doc and write out, okay, why are we doing this? Just real quick, what's the inspiration for this change that we want to make? Exactly what are we going to change, and then exactly how will we measure the results? And ideally that's quantitative, but often it's actually a good idea to just let it be qualitative at first to gather some initial results. So this is kind of what that looks like for us. So kind of have like a paragraph about why I want to do this, and this is actually like a really basic feature, but we ended up fleshing it out pretty well. The details were, the sample size has been updated, but so we said, okay, we want to make it this sample size, and we start at this date, and then basically kind of
So you guys are a small team. Why do you feel that you need to write something like that out?
Yeah, so, and it can be a little bit of overhead, and so you kind of have to balance that. But it's important because, there's so many times when we haven't done this in the past, when we've looked back and said, okay, wait, why were we doing this in the first place, and how do we even know if this worked out? It's amazing how many things you forget in 2 or 3 weeks when you're working on other things, and so it's super helpful to document that and say, okay, this is what we're going to plan, or this is what we're going to do, this is what we did, first of all, and this is how we're going to measure it. And it makes it way easier to say, okay, this was successful, or not successful, or kind of successful, and I want to try something else.
I found also, I guess we were bringing new people to the team and they had all these ideas. Some of them had been things we had tried, but maybe we couldn't adequately explain why it did or didn't work. And so having these on hand was really helpful to be like, okay, here's this is what happened. If you have new ideas based on this, or think we're wrong here, then we can talk about it. But as our kind of team, they knew the mindset we had with the product already.
Yeah,
which was really helpful.
Yeah. So then we decided to consolidate some of all this information into this big, beautiful doc that Josh made. And so we actually have a list, like you were saying. And you can't see it, but all of these different experiments link to that doc that I showed you. And we basically have a score for each one of them, between 0 and 1. Was it successful or not? I'm gonna get a summary. So any questions? on any of that.
We're gonna do a lot of open Q&A.
Good.
What are you all doing right now to try to make new campuses expand?
To try to expand to new campuses. Yeah, so we're actually at a pace now of being able to expand to 2 campuses every week. And we do it totally grassroots from the students up. So, what are we doing right now? We basically have built this whole process. You know, let's see. You want to go through? You set that down.
Sure, I know the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we basically have a plan for getting everything set up, the tech side, getting social media set up, and then we seed our site with some basic questions that we know all the students are going to ask anyway. Start getting that information out via Twitter, and the students start finding us through there. They start answering. So it's all fairly organic, but we have, you know, kind of an off idea for getting it to the critical mass we need.
Do you have any,
Like
does
support.
the administration of any school have some sort of negative about you coming to their campus with this? Have you experienced that?
We haven't really experienced that, no. And I think it's a valid fear that people would have that, oh, you know, students are gonna say all these bad things, but the students are going to your school. Like they usually, I've never really seen any case where they just say bad things about the school. Yeah, go ahead.
The school you started with, A&M, let's call it a mid-sized university.
Sure.
Have you tried any really large ones or any really small ones? Is there a difference in your market?
That's a great question. We definitely tried a number of different types of universities. Our focus is mainly on public universities. We have gone larger to Ohio State, which is doing well. We've gone smaller. It's like you say small? Slightly smaller. Okay. But I think it does, you know, the strategy does change a little bit from campus to campus. Or not really the strategy, but the tactics that we use in terms of marketing. But you know, it's always a surprise. And we didn't think Texas State would do very well, but it's done incredibly well. So.
And again, back to the potential liabilities, I guess.
Sure.
What did you do to bar against the liabilities when you did the terms and agreements? Do people register? Are there a way in which you're tracking the people themselves? Do they have to agree to their answers being shown?
Yeah, we wrote a basic terms of service out. We didn't hire a lawyer to do it. It was just a friend of ours who had done that sort of thing before, but yeah, it has a lot in there.
And are you engaging the students directly, or do you go through the universities and get their support to sort of promote it, or how's that?
Yeah, we go direct to the students. Yeah, through the channels like social media, like Twitter, Facebook, all that. Good.
I was wondering, how do you compete against indirect vendors, so Facebook groups, everything, Twitter users that you get, you know, like
Sure.
that stuff?
I think it's really just a matter of having more quality content. So Facebook groups, you might get the content there, but it's actually really hard to dig up. So we have like the benefit of SEO and organic search traffic, and just being able to search on our site. UCAC, I mean, just look at our site, and I think the quality of content overall is a lot higher and a lot easier to find.
When Reddit came out, there were stories that the founders talked about how they kind of faked a lot of it, and posted a lot of stuff up that was fake pages and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you guys do that? And if you can't talk, can you just like nod your head?
Yeah, no, we do that. And that, like I said at the beginning, when we start a new school, we have a list of, basic questions that we ask and get answered, and yeah, we do something very
So are
similar.
they all fake names and you're doing that, or?
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, when we spin up a site, it'll have like 30 questions or something like that. And what we generally find is like once we have that, we don't have to touch it anymore. We just tweet it out and people take it from there. But I think it's very important if you're building a community to model the community for the community that you're building, if that makes sense. And so people kind of they take behavior off of what they see other people doing, obviously. And so I think it's important. And that's kind of helped us improve the quality of the site instead of just making it like a forum or a chat room. I think that's actually made a huge difference.
do you actually go to the universities before you have them, or you just do social media?
It's all grassroots. So yeah, we don't actually engage
You don't
with
go
you directly. And that allows us to go on that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your business? It sounds like it's going to be ad-based, so how have you supported yourself up until now? And is there revenue yet?
Yeah, so I consider us pre-revenue. We've made revenue, but because our team is so small, we only have 3 full-time. We don't have anyone doing sales or revenue generation right now. Now we have done some validation on that side of, okay, well, we can make X times more than a Facebook ad could make or whatever.
Yeah, and in terms of how we support ourselves so far, we went through an accelerator in Bryan, Texas called Sumo to get started last summer, and they helped us raise that initial capital to get us this far.
How many people were your team?
So we have 3 full-time and 4 part-time, yeah.
All engineers? Or?
So there's 2 full-time engineers and another guy, and then we have 1 part-time engineer.
So if y'all are confident that you can, already turn over more in revenue than you already have that paid engine and growth kind of validated. If you don't mind me asking, what's holding you back from pushing that a little further?
Yeah, so I think we're actually just at a tipping point. We're about ready to do that. I wouldn't say it's 100% there, but it's really a matter of time and probably hiring someone on that can actually go make those cool calls or to take off someone else's work. So I could do that or someone else. But yeah.
Have you looked at changing the business model where a university pays for your service under their umbrella? So it's kind of like white label in the admissions office or whatever would call it the Texas A&M Q&A board or whatever?
Yeah, so that's actually something we tried to do early on, and it kind of just fell flat on its face. What we realized is with the university, the sales cycle is, it can be over a year. And so we just never had the resources or the expertise to go in and sell something like this. And we ultimately decided that's just not really what we wanted to do anyway. We actually kind of like the grassroots approach, and it's what makes us unique, and it's something that we're able to do that kind of no one else has really been able to do in a while. And so I think that's kind of cool.
Was there ever a point where you guys felt that you waited too long to build something? Did you reach a point where you missed something because of not building?
Yeah, I would say with those social media tools we talked about, right now we're at the point where it's hard to keep up. So just guys, give you an idea of how many posts we make a day. We're at 16 schools right now, and our posts are around 160 a day. So it's a lot of content, and we just have other things to do. So those are tools we could have probably built a couple months ago that would have helped us a lot.
Yeah, but it's at a point where it's kind of painful, but we're still making it happen. We're still hitting all the slots that we need to right now.
Yeah.
So,
Did your website ever crash because you had so many people come in and visit it?
yeah, it's
I feel that's one of the things that people over engineer about is they're afraid that there's going to be so much demand once I put this thing out there.
Yeah, I would say I don't know if we crashed because of just demand. We crashed more likely because of a stray robot crawler or some bug that we introduced that we didn't realize that we could handle all the traffic, but never directly because of just demand.
Actually,
Oh.
Yeah.
I see the phone app. Was that later on, or when you did that open source, was that on an app?
It wasn't. Yeah, we didn't have an app back then. It was just a website. Yeah, and it had really. Should we have a responsive design back then? No. Yeah, it was really crappy. And everyone uses our service on their phones, which is something we later realized. But yeah, we didn't build for that at first.
So when did you feel like you had enough traction to maybe go for funding, and then to add to that, when you tested a new feature, when did you feel like you had validation for that feature to actually building
Yeah.
out? Was there like a metric or something you're trying to hit?
Yeah. So in terms of traction, I think this is a really hard question to answer generally. I think you have to kind of look at other businesses that are similar in your space and kind of look at their story. For us, it was kind of this moment of like, oh, we're still students, and like people said, oh, you created, and it's called AskU. So like, oh, you created AskU, that's so cool. And we're looking at the numbers, and we're getting like over 40-50% of the campus on there every month. And so it was like, okay, we need to try this somewhere else because it's totally blowing up. So it kind of became obvious over time. But I think everyone else is, everyone else has a different story. Sorry, what was your other question?
When you test a new, or how do you go about, what's the process of testing a new feature, and when you feel like you have enough validation to build that thing out completely?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's that's one that I know I struggle with. I think before you build a feature, you need to define what success looks like for that feature, like what metric it needs to be driving. That's the number one thing that you need to do, and so that's part of the experiment design process. I probably should have made that really clear, but figure out what metric you're driving, or what behavior, or what what idea you want to create in your users' minds, and then figure out a way to validate that. It always helps if you have some number you can say, okay, we're going to shoot for this number, and if we get it, then it's successful. And that helps you make a decision later on. And you might say, okay, we didn't quite get there, but this is why we think we didn't get there, and we could tweak it. But yeah, it's always kind of a judgment call. It's never black and white, so something you have to think about.
When you guys know to actually start building apps in-house? I know that like going from Ruby and JavaScript to like Objective-C next could be a little jarring. So did you guys actually build apps in-house to contract them out?
Yeah, we cheated.
So actually we still haven't done Objective-C or Java. It's a phone gap app. We just made sure it was really, really good. Okay, phone gap is technology allows you to basically write an app that runs on the device, but inside is actually just a mini website that connects to your website. Similar. So if you open our app, it feels like an actual native app, but in reality, it's just JavaScript and stuff. And we're still using that today. So I was actually just taking around that while I was on an internship, and then that became our app. So
Yeah, people see before it's dropping or it's not native.
On Android.
It's on Android. It
Gotcha.
That's Android users are used to that. So.
Yeah, we use the Ionic platform, and you should look into it. It's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing. One thing is when you guys, I don't think you shared your numbers, and I have a better insight into that. That you guys were able to say that you were at 50% of a campus, and you're talking about your small team that's been doing open source software. You're not seasoned like coders, right? These aren't like nothing. They're super young, and so that you guys were able to get both this validation, but really actually find a model that had a lot of growth to it. Literally by being super minimal with what you guys put out, right? To have thousands upon thousands of people on that platform is a really good example of why you don't have to have this crazy full stack app that's doing all of these like slick things at first. If you can really focus on the value, and then if you can start figuring out, well, what are some natural ways to start getting other people to share or to refer, it's really less about the tool and more about, at the end of the day, why are people using my product? What's the problem that we're solving?
Yeah, and I think that's something I talked about earlier on. Was like I was really excited about the value that we were creating. It sounds very lean startup-y, but the problem that we're solving, and it was a problem that I experienced. And so focusing on that rather than focusing on the product that you're going to build, I think really just opens you up to this mindset. Any other questions?
So what does a workday look like for a brand new company? Or not brand new, but really young?
It's wild. You want to go into yours?
Well, mine is I sit down and I talk to my engineer, make sure I know what he's doing the day, and then we start coding, and then I probably answer 50 emails, and then interrupted 10 times, and then maybe get a little more code done. But
yeah, that sounds about like my day. Yeah, I mean, it just varies. Like, I'm always doing something different. A couple weeks ago, I was helping them like, build out internal tools, and now I'm working on more of the, the business networking and fundraising and all that stuff. So I think it's, there's always 1,000 things to do, and I mean, obviously prioritizing is really important. But yeah, I mean, every day is different.
Yeah, it seems like when you build a community of user-generated content, you have a chicken and egg problem at the beginning where you have to seed it with enough content to cause users to want to come and then get that going. Can you talk a little bit, I know you mentioned seeding questions. I don't know how large that is that you guys are doing, or if you're finding, have you ever had to motivate or incentivize people to come in and answer questions to get it going? Can you talk a little bit about how you overcame those problems, or if it was a problem at all?
Yeah, I think, jump in there, sounds better. I think for us, the answer was a little bit specific to what we do. I mean, so a big part of it is that the motivation for people to answer is intrinsic. And so that's what we really found, that kind of unlocked the key to being able to grow like we did. That people, they all go to this university, in most universities they kind of feel to some level like they're all in this together, and that's why they trust each other and want to help each other. And so we just created a platform for them to do that. And so it's really just finding all the right people, and some people are more motivated to help others than other people are. But so it's just putting it in front of as many people as possible. And so we just found those channels, Twitter. We do some email marketing as well. And we've actually found now the problem is, okay, we're able to get a ton of answers on our website. Now we need more questions. And so there's always this lopsidedness in the marketplace. So that's kind of where we are in that cycle.
And you kind of the typical content, for example, do you in a given day, like a kind of a possible questions, do you like frequently asked questions kind of thing? Like, how do you motivate like people constantly reading the stuff? Of course, people are not posting questions, but how do they keep coming back to see their old questions or something like that? How do you create interest to see the old content?
So we do a couple of things. Well, that's one big thing we found with the app is, especially freshmen, are interested in opening the app every single day and just looking to see what's happening or what are people talking about, what do I need to know. So that's a big way people are browsing content. And then from there, we have a related content feature that kind of keeps people going through content over and over. And that prioritizes the more popular content that's related to stuff you're already looking at. And then one big thing that's interesting about our marketing is we actually kind of see it as an extension of our service, and that is us, publishing. These are the top questions that are people talking about today or this week, and that's just showing up in your feed of things you're already looking at. It's really an extension of what we do for our users, and it gets them coming back.
Any other question?
Any thoughts? I've always been impressed on sites like Yelp and TripAdvisor that people spend so much time talking about things and answer questions.
Yeah.
Like, what is it, the human psychology? Why do people do that?
Gosh, what's that? I'm a psychiatrist, but I think it's just very intrinsically motivating. I think it gives people some level of significance, saying, okay, I helped this people, or I helped 2,000 people that have viewed this question since I posted this answer. I think that just motivates more people other than others. Some people more than others, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, we've definitely seen that happen. I was just thinking of, so we have this user on the Texas A&M website, which is the first one we launched, so it's obviously the biggest. And his answers account for, I think, over 30% of our posts on the entire website. And I have never met this person in my life.
Yeah. So it's very much a distribution of like, a very small percentage of users creates a very large percentage of content. I don't know what that breakdown is for us, but you guys might see that.
we text everyone.
Yeah, we should. I saw your question.
I think there's an empathy component to it where you guys go all this pain trying to find
answer to something yourself. And when you know the answer to something that you know that can help somebody else, you're like, I have to help.
Yeah.
Because I don't want somebody else to have to go through all the same kind of pain that I go through.
Yeah, I think empathy is a huge part of it, actually. I'm glad you hit on that. And I mean, that kind of goes back to why we built the service in the first place. Is, you know, we just, it's a pain in the ass to find all this stuff. Why don't we just make one place where you can find all of it? And we didn't want anyone else to have to deal with that. So, yeah, I think it's a big part of it.
How did you guys, I'm curious how you guys got exposed to the lean approach?
Well, you can talk about that.
I don't remember where I found the book, but I started reading the book my freshman year and then I made him read it. That's pretty much what happened. And then I went the Eric Rice Lean Startup book. And then I read Ash's book, and then I went to the Lean Startup Circle in Houston actually when I was a freshman in college, and that's advanced on that. So it's all just mostly reading.
Yeah, you told me you're interested in doing startups, and then you saw this book, and just about it.
I'm curious if you guys are getting exposed to it in school. You use A&M as an example.
So we did go through their program called Startup Aggieland, and before that, we met our team at 3 Day Startup actually, working on another idea, which would later change to this idea. Yeah, so they definitely introduced us. I guess you'd already been introduced, but to business model canvas and a lot of those. I don't know. Did they talk about the Lean Startup at all?
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah. Pretty sure they did. So.
Yeah, the sign is that, I mean, there's pretty much every university has some sort of entrepreneurship program that's not like UT has their one semester startup. So every university now is trying to basically put some sort of program in place and then partnering with really start to do these hackathons and weekend validation projects.
Yeah.
What stuck out a lot for them also when I first got to meet them is that they had a Google document that had all their experiments. Like, from a show of hands, how many people here actually like document experiments? Like, how many people write it on? Yeah, it's a very small crowd here, and so that to me is like the gold standard. Whenever I see someone who actually has somewhere where they've written experiments and they can have the metrics to it, that's like my radar. This person is doing something that 9 out of 10 people who are familiar with Lean Startup really don't put to practice. So.
So along those lines, how are you capturing the metrics? And when did you start capturing those metrics versus just kind of building and guessing?
I can talk all the day about that, so stop me if you're bored of that. Yeah, I love metrics. So we use, we use Google Analytics. Everyone does that. And then we also use Mixpanel. So we use them for different things. Google Analytics kind of is just this, you put this snippet in your website, you don't have to do anything, it just collects data for you. And then Mixpanel is more of the behavioral, okay, the user clicked on this link, or they said, I wanted to create a question, but they never actually created it, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, we track everything that we can think of that we might need at some point in the future. If they click on a question, we put the title and all the tags and the data, so we can go back and actually process through that on the back end. And so now we've actually, we added that fairly early on, and then later, probably almost a year later, 8 months later, something like that, we actually started writing out some back-end processing. So we pulled all our data from Mixpanel and said, okay, well, how do these things correlate and whatnot? And so now we have this dashboard, which I can definitely show you. Powered using Elasticsearch, we have all these custom dashboards and whatnot that allows us to kind of dig into the data a little bit more. But we didn't need that early on. But the important thing is, start collecting data soon, and that way you can mix and match it later on.
Why didn't you need the data early on?
Why didn't we need the data? Well, I think we needed the data, but we didn't need to necessarily do the in-depth analysis that we do now.
Yeah. For example, it wasn't optimizing feature X. It was, do people even care about product? It wasn't some focus on the little thing.
Yeah.
We'll get this in one.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, the farther you go, the more you want to optimize the more detailed things, and therefore the more detailed data you need. Well, any other questions? Going once?